This is a Talk2Jack podcast with UnkuJack, exploring topics on heart, mind, soul, and the human experience. Let's talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Talk2Jack podcast. I'm your host, UnkuJack, and today I'd like to talk about something that absolutely and positively transformed my life a few years ago. And I found myself talking about it more and more with my coaching clients lately. And that is the difference between awareness and consciousness. Specifically, the difference between self-awareness and self-consciousness. And I'll explain. I was once asked by my therapist a few years ago, what are you self-aware? Are you self-conscious? You seem to be very aware of yourself. Are you self-aware? And I said, yeah, I'm very self-aware. He says, why do you think you're self-aware? And I said, well, I think I pay attention to things around me, things that are happening within me. I'm conscious. I'm aware about how I interact with my environment and all my thoughts and all the things that are happening with me and around me and all of that stuff. And I felt really good about my response. And then he asked me a few questions relating to how I had been perceiving certain interactions that I had in my life in the past, whether it be interactions I had with colleagues, co-workers, friends, whatever. He asked me certain questions about my feelings around those interactions, and I had responded. And in the course of my vocalizing those responses, I realized that the perception I had of my co-workers and friends and certain people that I'd been interacting with in those contexts were not necessarily good. And that was a problem for me. And I started verbalizing that, and I kept talking about it. And he stopped me and he said, look, there's a difference between self-awareness and self-consciousness. And the difference between the two is judgment. That was profound for me because I couldn't understand it at the time. It didn't resonate deeply at the time. It was a little confusing at the time. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to understand that the difference between self-consciousness and self-awareness is the assignment of judgment to the scenarios and situations that we find ourselves in. And if I asked any one of you just the same way I was asked, are you self-aware, are you self-conscious? Oh, I'm self-conscious, I'm aware of what's going on around me, blah, 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 blah. But we don't necessarily understand the difference between self-awareness and self-consciousness. That self-awareness is the ability to just see ourselves, to be able to see what we're doing, what we're saying, how we're acting with our environment, and so on and so forth. And self-consciousness is the assignment of judgment to ourselves and to our environment and how we interact with that environment and how we interact with others. And I'll give you an example. I remember that there was a particular time I would drive into the office, and there was this guy who seemed to know exactly when I would be coming in, and he'd run over and he'd be just there when I drove in, and he'd come over, good morning, good morning, good morning. Oh, let me help you with your bag. And no matter how much I protested, he would insist on helping me with my bag. And I always felt so uncomfortable. And I always felt uncomfortable because I thought he was doing eye service. I felt that he was trying to butter me up so that I would see him in a favorable light. And therefore, if he ever messed up or if anything ever happened, he would be seen in a favorable light and he would be okay. And I said this during my therapy session back then. And my therapist at the time asked me, he said, but what if that was just his expression of love? mind blown. What if my entire fixation had been on that this man was doing everything he was doing because he was trying to butter me up? But the alternate scenario was, what if he was doing everything he was doing just because he loved expressing that affection and that care? He didn't want anything from me. And then he pointed out to me that sometimes we assign judgment based on the lens or the filter that we see ourselves, and we assign that judgment onto others. And that showed me that at that time I had the expectation that everything I did for people was basically deposit in a bank of favors, and expecting that I would be able to withdraw later. And that was huge. It was huge. And it also taught me that I was looking at myself in a certain way constantly, judging myself. Every action that I made, assigning judgment. Oh, you did this, you messed up. Oh, you did that, you were bad. Oh, you did this, you did amazing. You were good, you're fantastic. You did this, oh, you shit, you should have done better. And that's not always healthy. That it is better, it is a good thing to be able to look at yourself and assess your situation, how you're interacting with your world and the people around you without assigning judgment. And it is also a good thing to also assess people around you and to be able to see things and people around you without assigning judgment. That is part of this. That is what self-awareness is. It is just being aware. Consciousness, self-consciousness, assigns judgment. And so I want to challenge you today that there are certain things that you will look at and you're constantly berating yourself and judging yourself, assigning blame to yourself for certain things, and you beat yourself up over and over and over again. And you think that you're being righteous by doing so. And it's not necessarily true. You can take a step back from the judgment. You can lay down the rocks and the stones that you plan to throw on yourself, and you can just take a chill pill and just say, okay, this situation, this is what I did, and this was the outcome. Okay, this was not the outcome I had hoped for. What do I need to do differently? How do I need to react to this differently? How do I need to respond to this differently? And that is a much more productive way to live. That is self-awareness. That is being aware of self. That is being able to look productively on your environment, and without the guilt and the shame that comes with judgment, you can actually take consciously healthier decisions about how you choose to respond to situations in the future based on your assessments of how you are, how you think, how you feel, how you interact with the world around you. So, self-consciousness versus self-awareness. I'm not saying either is good or bad. I'm saying that one can be more productive than the other. You choose what is better for you. But my advice to you, and it's the same advice I took away from myself, is that it was more productive for me to be able to look at myself objectively, to look at my interactions with my environment objectively, to look at how I interact with the world around me objectively, and to make decisions based on that, as opposed to post-judgment being assigned to my actions and my thoughts and my patterns. I found that was not exactly the healthiest way to live, and that helped me reduce things like anxiety and panic and a feeling of low self-worth, and it allowed me to be able to look at myself objectively and to make better decisions. And I hope that it will do the same for you as well. Anyway, that's my thought for today. I hope you found that interesting. Please like, share, and subscribe my videos and my podcasts. And as always, be inspired. This has been the Talk2Jack podcast with UnkuJack. Tune in next time for another episode.